Welcome to Airway Exchange, the podcast for empowering educators and inspiring future CRNAs, a new series of Beyond the Mask supported by AA&A.
We're your host team. I'm Greg Collins.
I'm Nickie Damico.
I'm Erin Martin.
And I'm Louisa Martin. We're here to support the community of CRNA educators with conversations to explore, learn, and grow.
To pursue excellence in the evolving field of nurse anesthesia education.
And to champion our students and enrich the future of the profession.
This is Airway Exchange. Welcome to episode 3 of Airway Exchange. Thanks to those who are joining us for the second or third time, and welcome to all of our new listeners. I'm Nickie Damico, one of your hosts, and tonight I'm joined by my fellow Millers, Louisa Martin and Erin Martin. So the double Dr. Martins, and we are very excited to be here with you. We're going to kick it off tonight talking about a topic that has come up a lot for us as we've been brainstorming, and we definitely want to hear from all of you about the topics you want to hear about, the guests that you'd like for us to bring on this podcast in upcoming episodes. But as we've been brainstorming amongst ourselves, one of the things that has come up a lot for us is admissions. Some of us are in the midst of our admission cycles right now. Others are not, but looking forward to or dreading, depending on your opinion, the next cycle coming up. So we thought we'd kick off our episode 3 talking about that general area. I personally have been involved with admissions and nurse anesthesia programs for now 15 years. It was one of the things that I was thrown into as soon as I joined the faculty at VCU. It was, okay, great, now you're part of the admissions committee. And it was sort of a moment of, wait, what? I don't know anything about this. So it's something that a lot of us are involved with. And in the 15 years that I've been involved with admissions at my institution, I just can't even begin to describe the number of changes that we've seen. When I first started, we were doing admissions reviews, application reviews on paper, all paper applications. Everything was printed. We were reviewing everything by hand. And at that time, we probably saw, our program cohort size was smaller, and we probably saw maybe 1.2, 1.5 applicants per seat in our program. And now our program and many nurse anesthesia programs across the country are seeing a big uptick in the number of applications that we're receiving. And of course, the application process looks very, very different. There's a lot of especially recent trends that we're all seeing across programs. So thought we'd just kick it off tonight talking about some of the changes that we've seen in admissions and nurse anesthesia education. And I thought I'd start it off with you, Erin.
Agree with everything you said, Nickie. I also have been involved with admissions for a long time before I was a faculty person, actually as a staff person. At that time, we had staff CRNAs involved in our admission process as well, which was kind of a unique aspect. But I agree with you. I am in the camp of not loving the admission process. So I love that you said that from the outset, because I think there are two camps. I find the admission process to be probably the most important thing that we do in our roles. I really think we're the gateway to the profession, and that charge feels very heavy to me. And so I'm just afraid I'm going to screw it up. We have this conversation among our faculty team a lot. Gosh, no matter how much we refine, you know how you do this. After every application cycle, you think, what worked? What didn't work? What should we change? What could be better? What new things are on the horizon that we should be using? And despite your best efforts, you've always end up, and I want to say this correctly, you always end up with students who are more challenging than you anticipated. And so that can be really hard, I think. The holy grail is, what's the right question that will let us identify students who are going to be more challenging? And I don't think we found that. At least we haven't in our program. So I'm of the camp that finds the admission process stressful. I agree with you, Nickie, that since we had everything on paper and now we have technology has changed everything when it comes to this. So we started using a CAS system, a centralized application system, a few years ago, and our numbers completely doubled, because I think it's easier, right? Like, I'll just click this, and apply to these 10 programs and see where I land. So that changed things for us. I'll talk a little bit about what we've seen as far as changes in the process over the years. So using a CAS system definitely caused a wider reach, I guess I would say. We also, during COVID, So that was its own beast. We discontinued requiring the GRE because students were having, or applicants were having, a difficult time getting into testing centers, and it just felt like something we couldn't really require. One thing that we saw with that was nurses who'd been nurses for a really long time, I think, who'd been maybe holding off because the GRE was a barrier. When it wasn't there anymore, we saw an uptick in people who'd been in practice for a longer amount of time. Another change has been the dawn of AI. And that's probably something we could talk about on its own. But, what is an essay even worth anymore? So I think those are the things that we have seen that have caused this challenging process to be more challenging. Louisa, I'm going to kick it over to you and see kind of what your thoughts are on kind of the evolution before we maybe start to talk about some specific challenges.
Sure. Great conversation so far. I've only been in academia full-time 3 years, but right out of the gate, got involved on the admissions committee. And I love the admission. Maybe I should say I love and hate the admissions process. I enjoy talking about nursing anesthesia anytime I get. So I enjoy talking about talking to and interacting with potential applicants, especially hearing what it is specifically about nursing anesthesia that they're drawn to, about this profession that I love, what in them draws them to this profession. And, we too use Nursing CAS, a centralized application system. And we've seen, even in the last 3 years just the short 3 years I've been there, we have seen an increase every year in the number of applicants and the number of qualified applicants. If you're looking at typical metrics, I would say that many nursing anesthesia programs use, like GPA, plus or minus GRE, years of experience in critical care, letters of reference, personal statement, whether you still do that or not. But I think that the struggles that we've had are similar to the ones you've mentioned with AI. So seeing more and more, and there's no really good way to detect, is it AI generated or not? Is it AI assisted? Is it completely AI generated? I was reviewing applications last night and got different answers from different detectors, right? And so last year, we actually implemented an in-person writing activity or assessment with paper and pen. And I think many of them were caught off guard by that because, the other thing with technology is that applicants can talk to one another. I would say another thing that we've seen is with programs out there that are there to foster or enhance someone's chances of getting in, how to interview well, how to write a good admission statement, how to potentially say all the right things. And I'm not speaking negatively. I think that that's a wonderful way to reach our hand out to nurses who want to be nurse anesthetists. But I think sometimes that's challenging for me, wanting to find someone who genuinely and authentically, number one, knows what a nurse anesthetist does. Not just, this is the next step in my career. I've always wanted to be a nurse anesthetist. I love the pharmacology and the science behind it. But a question I love to ask is, what did you last see when you shadowed in the operating room? And what about that experience did you really love? What did you love seeing? I mean, I remember as an applicant or a shadow in the operating room just being, my mouth hanging wide open, fascinated by what this nurse anesthetist was doing and just drawn to it in awe, intimidated. Will I ever be able to do that? But there were many things that I loved about it. But I feel like what I would like to see in an applicant is a genuine answer to a question like that. And they can really tell me authentically what it is about nursing anesthesia that they are drawn to. And, I did a little bit of reading in the hour or two before we met. And one of the articles that I found in the ANA said we still don't have what you were saying, Erin, like we still don't have one metric that says this is it. And I think that's because one reason is because
there isn't one.
Right.
There
There's
isn't
so
one.
many things,
Yes.
absolutely, that go into being a fully competent nurse anesthetist. And one of those is emotional intelligence. And there are people out there with a 4.0 GPA who may not be received well by a patient because they don't have that emotional intelligence. Another thing another factor or attribute that this article mentioned that the Army's program uses is locus of control. So does somebody feel like their success is something that's within their control, or is it something that's dictated by people around me? And I think you have to have internal locus of control to successfully navigate a program where you're going to receive a lot of constructive feedback. I'm not saying mean, but sometimes the learning curve is steep, and many times in simulation and in the OR, you're receiving constructive feedback that is how you can improve And if you're constantly looking to the external world to blame, number one, that takes your power away. And number two, that would be a real challenge as a nursing anesthesia resident. And then other things like reaction to criticism. I don't know. Those are just a few things that were on my mind as the two of you were talking and were on my mind today. And we are in the middle of our admission cycle right now. So, and I think it's, the personal statement is really, like I think you said, what's the point of having it now? Because you really can just say to ChatGPT, hey, here's the prompt. Or what, Copilot, here's, my CV, write an answer.
But Louisa, did you guys bring out the blue books? Do you know what the blue books are?
I don't know what the blue books are.
Oh, back in the day, we did on-site writing, and in college in general, then you used the paper blue books.
Yes.
So it was actually, writing in cursive and, getting out the actual blue book. So, I mean, I can't imagine the looks we would get.
We'll have to get those out.
I will tell you that we brought a little bit of that back this year. So I will come back to that. But I think, Louisa, one of the things that I just wrote down was sweet spot. So it feels like there is a sweet spot somewhere, right? So, we focus so much on GPA, but you're right. I mean, and I remember at ADCE a few years ago, a lecture about admissions stuff, talking about how often the 4.0 student hasn't ever been challenged the way they will be challenged in a nurse anesthesia program. And when it happens, they don't know what to do. And so I think that, I think when we look at our application pool, we have a particular group of people. We have extremely high achievers, type A, 1,000%. And we're proud of it too, which that's the other facet. So we have these people who have always been at the top of their game, and then they're going to be challenged in a way that they probably haven't been before. Academically, in their undergrad, they maybe didn't have a family. They didn't have another life that they had when they were working 3 to 4 12-hour shifts a week. And so now this level of challenge academically is going to be a whole different ballgame. And that's what we're seeing as something that's really hard. And so I think finding that sweet spot between the really brilliant academic person who also has that life experience or that ability to emotionally regulate, and as you mentioned, Louisa, that emotional intelligence piece. I love this idea of locus of control. I was just writing that down. So I don't have an answer to that, but I think finding that sweet spot is my constant. That's what I want to find, is what is the right formula. And I don't know that there is one, but I think that I don't know. Anybody have the magic formula?
I don't think we'll ever find it. That could just be, a rare opinion. I could be in the minority there, but I think it matters based on the resources and the structure of your individual program. So what may be the right formula for similarly structured or similarly resourced, there's so many factors that could go into that. And I think for me, one of my, theses is that we need the candidates to truly understand what the program they're signing up for looks like. Is that the right setting and the right structure? Is that the right program size? Is that the right program resources and just the structure of clinical? Are they a primary site model clinical residency program, or is it one that rotates through a lot of clinical sites? So getting to know whether or not that candidate understands what they're signing up for, and then that gets a little bit into the locus of control, because they do have to acknowledge and really embrace the idea that they are signing up for this. This is their volunteer. One of my mentors, Mike Valacaro, he was the program director at VCU for a lot of years, and he spent a great deal of time in the admissions process having conversations with the candidates about, you always need to keep in mind you're a volunteer here, not a victim. We're not doing anything to you. If your mindset is, do I have to? The answer every time is going to be absolutely not. You don't have to do anything. This is not a have to situation. This is something that, we get to do this every day. We get to be here to train to do this amazing job. And, it is something that a lot of others would like to be doing. And that simple shift, it's not, about being, testy about it or sort of, it's not an attitude behind that statement. It's just simply recalling and embracing that this is a privilege to do what we do. It's a privilege to get to train to do this. And I think when you're in the application process, you remember that and embrace that. And then once you get in and you get going, humans being humans, we're going to naturally feel like, oh, this feels, it's a little more uncomfortable. It's a little bit more discomfort than I had anticipated. So the living it and feeling it feels different. So you start to wonder, do I have to do this anymore? And just, being able to recenter and reset and reframe in your mind. It's okay to wonder that from time to time, but you just have to keep coming back to, no, this is worth doing. It's something worth achieving and something worth working for. I think is something we're looking for. But I guess circling back, I just wonder if there is one formula. There are probably some themes. There may be some metrics that we just haven't commonly utilized yet, but there may not be one formula for every program and the successful candidate for every program.
I think you're probably right. And that it depends on, I think you make a great point that it depends on the system in which the program as a whole, maybe some candidates could succeed at any program, but it has to be the right fit because it's a relationship. And I try to remind the students to tap back into the day of their interview when they sat before us and presented, when we said, tell us about your understanding of the rigors of the program and what do you have set up and how do you deal with stress? Because, and I've said this before, that one of the things that I struggle with most is just that balance between creating a wonderful programmatic experience and not being, aggressive or inhumane from the podium in the lecture hall, but also not being too easy, too much of a pushover and giving in, when they want something. And I heard actually on Beyond the Mask, I think they were interviewing, I think it was Randall Moore, and who recently returned to clinical practice after 6 years away. And he was talking about the discomfort of returning to clinical practice after being away for 6 years. But he said, I'm old enough to know, or I have enough experience to know that when I'm uncomfortable, I'm learning. And so I really try to remind the students that you're going to be really uncomfortable, but it's because it's hard. No, and I feel like in general, Americans don't like to feel discomfort. We want a pill for everything. We do. We want the easy way out, and we don't like. We want to avoid pain, and that's our job, right? Is to help people avoid pain when they're having surgery. But anesthesia school is, maybe for some it's not, but for the majority of students, it's uncomfortable. It's hard. It's stressful. But it's got such an amazing return on its investment. But if you're not uncomfortable, you're not growing and you're not learning. Your brain's not having to think and work. And so I try to tell them that, but I don't know that it always gets through to them. I don't know that I always get through to them on that.
So the secret about nurse anesthesia is out, right? It's a great profession. The job market is hot. I mean, there are a lot of reasons to pursue this right now. And so what we have seen in our program is it seems that interview process is as much that applicants are interviewing us as we are interviewing them. And to Nickie, to your point, I think that's really important. And that is something that we have begun to stress, really talking about the realities of our program. Our program, 90% of their clinicals are going to be at an anesthesia care team model. So if that's something that they are not going to desire, they should go somewhere else. Some other nuances. So I say that right out on interview day. But I think that is a bit of a flip from when I first started in the admissions process, is that people were, dying to get into our program. And we're finding things that in the last couple of years, we're having people who said, yes, I would love that interview slot. And 2 days before the interview, they say, no, I'm going to be at a different program. I got accepted elsewhere. I'm not going to take my interview slot. So that's a big shift. Or even people who were committed to starting the program and then they got in somewhere else. We have recognized that we need a deeper alternate list than we ever had before. It used to be years ago, we would maybe take a couple off the alternate list. But now it is definitely consumer-driven process, it feels like. And so that's something that's been different for us, is recognizing that it's a bit more of a business than it used to be, I guess I would say. Are you guys feeling that at all?
Oh, definitely. I think in part the pieces of what you just said about us seeing candidates that are backing out or agreeing to interview and then not actually going through with that. I feel we're also in nursing CAS, and I feel that some of it is so easy to hit yes, apply to more programs. So I do think it's easier for the candidates to spread the net wider. It's a relatively modest cost to do that. So exactly, you're just going to throw spaghetti on the wall and see how many interviews you get, and then decide to back out of that. So we're also seeing that. So that could be part of it as well. And I do think also there are a lot of prep programs that our candidates are availing themselves of, and social media. They're communicating with each other. And it seems in that space, one of the pieces of advice that they're getting either from other, candidates or from prep programs is, to be that informed consumer, which I think fundamentally is a great thing. I've just talked about how I want them to ask and to know more about what they're signing up for. But I do also think that that's one of the things that they are hearing is make sure you have great questions, make sure you really be that informed consumer, ask hard questions of the people that are interviewing you because, they want you just as much as you want to get in a program. So the dynamic feels different than it used to be. And I think probably there's a lot of factors that have led to that, and I think the great thing is the candidates are coming more prepared, and they do, I think, benefit greatly from some of the conversation and some of the advice that they're getting. But I also think sometimes it seems to steer them a little bit wrong as well. And maybe it's just that they are highly motivated to get into a nurse anesthesia program. The selection bias is if you're doing a prep program and you're talking a lot on Reddit or other forums, I know there's a lot of them out there, you're just naturally a candidate who is going to be the candidate who's going to also be very compliant. If you get advice, you're going to listen to it. And sometimes it feels that the authenticity is lost because they're saying what they think they should say instead of just being themselves. I don't know if you're feeling that as well, that it's sometimes it hinders them a little bit. It's not that they're getting bad advice. It's just that they're a little bit more structured and less likely to show us their authentic self, which is what we want to see.
We're feeling that a ton. So it's almost as if each year there's like two questions. Like, this must be what's being promoted this year, right? Would you have one of your students take care of you if you were having surgery? We're hearing that a lot, And so, yeah. And the answer is yes, for me. But it is really hard. It's hard not to, being honest, and there will probably be applicants listening to this. But when I hear that question, I think, oh, they've been prepped. And as you said, Nickie, prep is not a bad thing, right? We want people to do their homework, but it's that authenticity piece, Louisa, like you brought up at the outset. It's so hard to know, again, where's the sweet spot, right? Between your authentic self and really knowing who you are versus you've done your homework and you're asking all the questions that we think you should ask. So I don't know. I mean, I feel older and older every single day as I think, well, it wasn't like this when I applied. You never want to have that attitude, right? But we are losing a little bit. I will tell you this year, we got rid of essays in our program, and we are utilizing a software system. I'm not endorsing anything. I will just tell you we've had a good experience with a software system where we received video responses from applicants. And that's been really cool. It feels like we do that as our first level to decide who comes for an in-person interview. So that has not replaced the in-person interview for us, but it has replaced the essay portion. We felt like the essays were a little bit challenging due to AI to know who wrote it, who proofed it. Is this really the applicant's work or their voice? So this video question response was an interesting addition to our process. We've completed interviews. We have not made decisions. So we are literally in the middle of this right now. That was an interesting piece for us. So that is something where I think technology and new ideas has really augmented our process, where some of the other maybe technological new things has made it more challenging. Anybody else using anything different in your process?
I'm not confident that it's the exact same one, but we have a two-part. We switched to asynchronous video-based interviews during COVID because our admissions application closed March 15th of 2020. So we were going right into the selections and had to rapidly pivot. So it was a mad dash to try to figure out, okay, how can we keep admissions on time? Oh, well, maybe it'll only be a couple of weeks. We can just, delay things. And then it got quickly to the point where we realized, okay, whoa. And then the unintended benefits of that led us to continue to use that. And then in part because of some of the factors you just mentioned, that even at that, asynchronous interviews do feel sometimes still a bit stiff. We've now added a second stage, video-based, same platform, live interview, and we do a almost like an MMI style mini interviews in the live portion. And that live component is just so valuable. So we also do videos. I think it definitely helps you feel like some of the potential pitfalls of having someone do a written statement. We're finding the same. Written statements are almost useless at this point. You just can't know with a static statement whether or not that person actually wrote it. So if it's not doing it in real time, it seems like a waste of time. But we still have them for the moment. And then the asynchronous interviews, that has its own challenges. It's incredibly helpful, but doesn't get us all the way to where we felt like we wanted to be. So we're bringing back the synchronous video-based. So, it's not the perfect formula, but it's definitely, this year was, we just completed a cycle and made selections with that structure, and that live interview piece was so helpful. And I know I've heard some chatter on our social media sites that talked about bringing back the in-person interviews for some of the same reasons that we've talked about. And definitely that's, I think, going to be an ongoing conversation, but I'm so interested to hear how others get past some of these barriers. I think the AI, the social media chatter, I don't always feel like the process is clean. Like it feels like some of them knew the questions before they got there. So, some of the chatter makes it challenging. So I'm just fascinated by what others are doing and how they're trying to overcome those barriers. Louisa, do you do your processes like we described or different altogether?
So we still use 3 essay prompts. 2 are they're pretty standard essay prompts, and we used to do a video piece, but it went away. But now that's one thing I love about this podcast that we're doing is hearing what everybody else is doing. And I think it's a great idea to bring it back, because as I was reviewing the essay prompts over the last several days, I get upset if I feel like they use ChatGPT, but then I get upset if they have typos and grammatical errors. So it's like, you should have at least put it into, or, like I had my sister, I guess, I was just so OCD about the personal statements and essay prompt that I submitted, And so to me, if you have typos, that is a bad look to me. I think there's something to be said about being a good writer, but nowadays, or not nowadays, I think most, when I think back to when the entry degree was a master's degree, which is what it was when I went to school, I wasn't as good of a writer as I was when I finished my doctoral program, right? So many of our applicants or candidates, most of them, I would say, they're not excellent writers. They're going to get that hopefully improved writing as they go through the program. And so anyway, my point was I found myself, this isn't really fair. I'm upset if they totally generated their essay with AI, but I'm also upset if they didn't use AI or another human being to read over this and say, this could probably look a little better if you did it this way, or put a comma where you should have put a period, or anyway, et cetera. And there is, like you said, no good way to know, did AI do this or not? Because now there's AI out there that can generate it in a way that isn't detectable if I think that's out there. So it's kind of like there's no good way to do it. I do like the idea of using videos, but I also we're keeping the in writing prompt. The prompt will change to any applicants who are out there listening. The prompt is going to change this year as to what it was last year, because I know people do talk, but we still do face-to-face interviews unless you live more than a certain distance away, then we can do a virtual interview. I love interview day. I love interacting with the applicants. I like that face-to-face time. I think you can learn a lot about a person in a short amount of time. I've been a CRNA 10 years, but I find myself saying to the students, well, when I interviewed and when I was in school, like we didn't get academic holidays once clinical started. And, in Boston, Massachusetts, we had one snow day in my 3 years. And my last year, there was the snowiest winter on record. So don't complain if I feel like we all do that. Well, when I was, we try not to, but we do. And I think change, some of it's good, some of it's bad. It's hard, but I do think sometimes, and I don't want this to sound the wrong way, but sometimes I do think where the students are interviewing us, I think that's great. And I think that they should look for a program where they feel supported. But I think sometimes sometimes my perception is that the line gets crossed into a sense of entitlement. And I'm not speaking about, it's just a sense I get. And I'm sure that there are generational differences, and you've got the impact of COVID-19 and social media and technology and all these things. And I'm sure that when I was interviewing, that faculty were talking about my generation, So I think there are generational challenges always, but I think that sometimes my sense, when I'm struggling with that balance of being a pushover and being a militant, inhumane, aggressive faculty member, which I'm not, but trying to find that sweet spot as a faculty member, I don't know, I think my perception is that there's this sense of entitlement where I love what you said, Nickie. This isn't something you have to do. It's absolutely 100,000% something you get to do.
I wrote that down, actually. I wrote that down while we were in here because I agree with you completely, Louisa. I think that could be a total separate podcast episode, actually, about kind of where is that sweet spot. I think it comes down to having solid, everybody around here thinks that I'm like the policies are, but what are your policies? What are your technical standards? Like we have a standard, we can find different ways to meet that, but we can't lessen the standard. So I think we should write that down. Erin Ransford, write that down as a podcast episode. But I think you're really right.
So we're all looking for the right formula, the right mix of different metrics. Are any of your programs starting to use data analysis to try to evaluate if you've made changes in your admissions process? That's sort of a dream that I've had of being able to really, go back and do that, post hoc analysis to see, okay, we made these changes. But I'll say one of the barriers to doing that is you have to pivot so fast in admissions to stay up to date with the latest technology, with the latest, application systems or so forth. So it becomes incredibly difficult because to truly do that, we would have to wait, keep everything the same, wait for another 2 to 3 years, see how candidates, are doing within our programs. I mean, so hard to do that because it's not a static process. It's just changing. Every year that I've been involved with admissions, we've had to pivot and change so quickly. So it makes it really challenging. I don't know if you guys have any experience with being able to do that kind of analysis and looking back and saying, okay, I know when we have students that are unsuccessful, it's devastating for all of us, everybody involved. And you're trying to constantly sort of, look back and say, how could we have known this was not the outcome that any of us wanted to see? So how could we have better predicted that? I don't know if you share that experience of feeling that way, if it doesn't work out the way we want it to, and if you have any thoughts about trying to make our admissions processes data-driven. Is that possible? Could we ever do that?
That's interesting, Nickie. We have at my institution an Innovation and Transformation Committee, and the chair of our committee has actually come up with a tool. I have a meeting tomorrow, actually, to talk about this. But a tool, perhaps, that we could use that, and I'll know more tomorrow after 3 p.m., but a tool where we can put in metrics, whatever they are that we're looking for, and it'll push out like a spiderweb type plot that will show us how much of those things fall into the stuff that we're looking at. And so we're hoping exactly for what you talked about, Nickie, to be able to maybe quantify this a little bit more. And I think we may apply that to our cycle this year as we're making decisions. But certainly my interest is in looking back 5 years and saying, okay, let's go through all those applications and apply this tool and see, did it pan out, right? Did it really tell us something? And could we have predicted that maybe the 4.0 students had a harder time? Or maybe it was the people who had more than 10 years of ICU experience, or maybe it was, who knows, right? Somebody who worked in a MICU versus a NICU. I don't know, but I think there's a lot we can do. So my answer is, I don't know the answer, but stay tuned.
The future, maybe we can get to a data-informed approach in the future.
I know like we've made some curricular revisions and implemented a new nurse synthesis course that's over their entire senior year, the last 3 semesters of their, last year, and how that's impacted our NCE scores, which have gone up, our pass rate's gone up, which is great because I know a trend after the implementing the doctoral as the entry-level degree that nationally board scores went down for many programs. But no, I think, Erin, it was you who said at the beginning, you think that admissions is the most important thing we do. And I think you're absolutely right because it's, if something bad happens in the OR, a bad outcome, sometimes we do a root cause analysis and you want to go back to what was the root of the problem, right? And when we do it's an essential part of what we do as anesthesia providers is the right preoperative assessment, a comprehensive pre-op assessment, right? Not one that takes too long, but not one that misses anything either. And so I think there's so many different things that go into making an applicant successful, as you said, Nickie, in a different program. I don't know that and as you said, things are constantly changing. The applicant pool is constantly changing with the times. I don't know that we'll ever have the perfect metric. And I think other things happen, like life happens to our students, right? There could be a death in the family, tragically, and that can change you can be a top-notch student and something catastrophic happens and it changes them. And that is devastating. I would love to find the perfect combination of metrics tailored to our program, which maybe AI can help us do that. I don't know that we ever will. I do think being data-driven is important. So I hope we can. I like to track as much as possible, to see what ultimately is going to predict a student to be successful on the NCE. And so I think that, like you said, Erin, that admissions is the most important thing we do because that's where we start. And I think that once they are admitted, we have admitted them because we think we're confident that they are going to be successful in our program. And it's not that we owe them something, but in a way where, it's a relationship and we have said, we think you have what it takes to successfully navigate this program and sit for boards and be a wonderful CRNA. So that was a long answer to a short question, but no, we don't. We aren't actively looking at anything different, I guess, that we've done in the last few years, but as far as interviews and the application process, but we are looking at different things as far as NCE scores for sure.
One of the other trends we're all seeing is a larger number of candidates for our programs coming to our state and national, the ANA meeting at Congress and so forth. Have you seen any impact of that shift on your admissions process? Does that make them better qualified or not? Or any other thoughts on that trend and how it might or might not be affecting admissions?
We're seeing that a lot. I can tell you, I think there were, is it thousands of, how many people did we have at the annual Congress this year that were RNs? It was a big number. And so I kind of go back and forth between this. At our state meeting, there were a couple of RNs there that actually had interviews in our program. And so they were saying, I'm going to see you next week, for our interview. And that was it was great. But then there's a little bit that thinks, again, is this just part of the recipe? Is this part of the recipe that they've been told to do? That's the cynic in me. Maybe that comes out. I think that shows great initiative, right? They're spending money, they're taking time, they're immersing themselves in our world. I think it's impressive. We're now showing the cards, right, for those who are interested in applying. But I think it shows great initiative. I would have, to be honest, 20 years ago, I never would have thought of doing that. And so I don't think it hurts. I think it's impressive.
Yeah, I agree that to me, it shows the links that they're willing to go to. To me, it does. It shows a lot of dedication and that they are really dedicated to the idea and of becoming a nurse anesthetist. So, sometimes it's awkward, I think, when somebody just hands you a CV at a meeting, but I just, many times they're enthusiastic and excited. And it shows a lot of, in my opinion, dedication, because I talked to a lot of nurse anesthetists and I shadowed a lot, but I didn't know what the American Association of Nurse Anesthetists was, and I hadn't been to a national meeting. Yeah, I think it's another way for them to demonstrate a willingness to make, that's a financial sacrifice they have to make and a time sacrifice that they have to make to, depending on how far they have to travel. One of the other factors that the article in the ANA was by Julia Fesco and 2 other CRNAs, but they talked about grit, and she may have presented at ADCE a couple of years ago. I'm not sure if it was this program, but which they define grit as perseverance and passion for long-term goals. And to me, somebody who goes to a national meeting, that demonstrates a little bit of grit. Is it part of the recipe? Are they trying to check the boxes? I think part of being a good nurse anesthetist too is having good intuition. And I think sometimes when you're in those interviews, for me, like sometimes good and sometimes bad, my intuition tells me kind of one way or the other. Is that y'all's experience with intuition as well? I'm not saying that we base our entire admissions process on intuition. I'm just saying that I think you can, again, intuit a lot about a person in just a few minutes of interacting with them.
Well, it certainly catches us off guard sometimes, and we have to be aware now at meetings. We're being interviewed and someone's watching, better behave ourselves at these meetings because our next admissions candidate might be sitting there. For me, I think it's a lot like shadowing. It's not just that you show up and check a box, but are you asking the right questions? Are you really making the most and being inquisitive and networking and meeting people and learning more about the specialty? So it's great to just show up, but it's also really great to, make the most of that opportunity and truly, embrace it and try to understand, how do I fit into this new specialty that I want to be a part of? What are the challenges? I always want to know that a candidate for admission understands that it's not all sunshine and roses. It's all of these wonderful things to be a nurse anesthetist, but it's also, a lot of responsibility. It's a lot of challenges. It is humbling always. I've not had a year of my CRNA life that I haven't been humbled mightily. So, I think, it's important that they have a very balanced understanding of what they're signing up for, that they don't have this rosy view of it's always just this amazing thing. It doesn't feel amazing every day to be a CRNA. So I think it's about what did they get out of the experience or what did they not. I'm hoping that this episode will generate a lot of conversation, that those that are listening and now a part of our fellowship will get involved in the conversation and share their experiences.
Well, I think this has been a really insightful for me. It's been validating hearing other people talk about the challenges of the admissions process, the challenges and the great rewards. I think it also reinforces to us that we are in a profession that so many want to enter, and that's very gratifying. But definitely the responsibility that we all feel with admissions is real and warranted. Thank you so much for this amazing talk. Again, I think we covered a lot of topics here. For those who are listening, we are so glad that you're tuning in. We are very excited to have episode 3 recorded here. We will also be recording episodes live at Edge, formerly known as ADCE, February 4th through 7th, 2026 in Louisville, Kentucky. We hope to see you at the premier conference for CRNA educators. You can also earn up to 18.5 MAC education credits, Class A CE. Please register online at aana.com/edge. Thanks for tuning in. You can follow us on Instagram at Airway Exchange Podcast and visit us online at beyondthemasspodcast.com/Airway Exchange to catch up on episodes, learn about the host team, or send us a message with your topic or guest requests. So thank you for tuning in. Thanks to the rest of the Miller team here tonight on our recording, and we look forward to catching up with y'all again soon.